Colin and Belinda, thank you very much for taking time.
Happy to be here.
Happy to be here.
Great. So the intent of this conversation is to understand how you have taken the extensive area of the Mississippi River and built an organization to see what you all have in common. I think there are 105 cities in your organization, what you are working on collectively. Probably at this time, also thinking that there are a lot of changes at the federal government level, changes at state and regional levels, how an organization like this can do some things that maybe other politically or governmentally organized entities can't. And what are the critical things on your agenda right now? I'm mentioning all that because I think we can compare that favorably with the 2,400-mile transect of Ten Across and learn from what you're doing. So I think today really is, for us, a learning session. So, Belinda, why don't you go first?
Okay, so actually, administrative background, I get to elected position as a councilwoman in 2005, did 2 terms as councilwoman and then elected mayor in 2013. Pretty proud of the fact that I was the first woman elected here in the city, either on the council or as mayor. And this is my 4th term of office as mayor, sworn in just about 2 weeks ago. Got involved in MRCTI in 2014. And so I've known Colin now for over 10 years, and the organization has been an incredible asset to me as mayor, and has put myself in a position to just brainstorm with mayors, 105, as you said earlier, across the Mississippi corridor. And we have been able to come together to talk about what is important to all of us relative to the river. And okay. I'd love Colin to expound on that. And it's an incredible example of how we can do things on a region basis rather than work in a vacuum. So Colin, you want to take it from there?
Well, before you go, just so people understand where Gretna is, because they may not, but having spent time in New Orleans, I do. Explain where Gretna is.
Okay, so Gretna is right across the Mississippi River from New Orleans. We call it the West Bank, or most of us the Best Bank, and I know you know that because you were here for 10 years. Yeah. However, it's not west at all. It's probably more southern, more south of New Orleans, but we live on the West Bank. It's a small municipality, upwards of about 20,000 people, but abutting the New Orleans city.
Great. And Colin, a little bit about your background.
Sure. Good morning. Really great to be here, Duke. Thanks for having us. And you're lucky. Mayor Constant's one of our rock star mayors, so you're in real good hands here.
I can tell.
I am from Missouri. I was born and raised in the St. Louis region, and grew up next to the Mississippi River. It's this iconic thing behind me right here with the historic and very famous Eads Bridge, the first all-steel bridge to cross the Mississippi River in U.S. history. And the river has been a part of my life ever since I've been on Earth. So it's something to love and care about. And we started this association in Washington, D.C., of all places, in 2012. We were incubated in a larger organization at the time, the Northeast Midwest Institute. And then we left the nest, and the mayors moved us here where I'm standing now, which is St. Louis. So the north leg of the arch is 50 meters that way, right in front of me. And this way is Minnesota. And if I wanted to go see Mayor Constant, I would go that way south on this riverway. I'd get there in about 7 days. So it's if I just floated. So it is lifeblood of our community, and it's incredibly important, not just to St. Louis and Gretna, but all the way up to Bemidji, Minnesota, and everybody else in between. Care about it so much. I also ran for office. I'm a state rep in the Missouri House, and pushing for a lot of the same things that our mayors are pushing for along this iconic waterway. I'm also an environmental scientist and an adjunct professor of sustainability and macroeconomics at WashU and SLU. So I try to just shepherd all of that into the supporting our mayors and everything that they are trying to accomplish on what is America's original Main Street.
Great. And this is the first time we've done our podcast with one of our interviewees on site, which is fantastic. And since you mentioned it, the Eads Bridge, which is in the background, which crossed the Mississippi and really opened the doors to the West. I happen to know this. And because New Orleans was so worried about the shipping of goods and other things not going to New Orleans, being redistributed, they held a World's Fair in 1884 to remind the country that no, New Orleans is still here, major port, really important. But that piece of infrastructure behind you was enormously influential in shaping the country. And the engineer Eads, as you probably know, is quite a character involved in the Civil War and a variety of other things. So anyway, glad to have you on site and sharing that. So the MRCTI, maybe Colin, as executive director, you could start here. If you were to list the things that are critical, and let's talk about sustainability for one, since it's in your background. There are a lot of concerns about us maybe at the federal level throwing money towards things that are squishy. You know, what is sustainability? You obviously care passionately about it. You're expert in it. Talk about the MRCTI's notion of what you need to be doing to thinking about sustainability.
Sure. So the most important thing that our mayors have really been committed to from day one is sustainable development, but at scale. Not only doing it inside our cities, but across the larger Mississippi River corridor landscape, and where possible, motivating and profiling that work across the entire 31 state basin. So we have some levels here of interface. We have the 31 state Mississippi River Basin, which goes from 2 Canadian provinces to the Gulf, as well as from Pittsburgh to the border of Idaho. So it's a considerable area, 2/3 of the continental US. It's the largest navigable basin on Earth. Of course, it's the largest one in North America, in the Western Hemisphere. So it is it's essential that we keep it operating. And then we have the 10-state corridor. And that is just the 10 states that touch the main stem Mississippi from the headwaters to the Gulf. And we have cities from all 10 states that are members of our association. It's 105 cities altogether. There's 124 mayor-led municipalities directly adjacent to the main stem Mississippi. We've got 105 of them. There's a few holdouts, but Mayor Constant's going to capture those colleagues right quick. We'll have them all one day, and even more. We're involved in efforts right now to extend up the major tributaries into a larger cohort of mayors, because this work is so important. Sustainability inside our cities really means building resilience to impacts to keep our economies going strong, but in a way that their environmental effect is minimal or even beneficial. And then we take that experience inside the city and we broaden it across the larger landscape and across larger economies such as the global commodity supply chain, manufacturing, agriculture, outdoor recreation, and tourism. So we really work hard to anchor our sustainable development practices and projects to a profit motive. Why? So that those projects can be supported by the market-based economy. A regulatory approach really tends to fall apart inside various legal bodies. And if you do achieve some sort of regulatory regime, it's constantly under attack. However, if people are making money at doing good things, it tends to sustain itself and bring more in. So that's what we work on.
Yeah. So, what's interesting about what you're doing with the MRCTI is that it's an enormous area, and yet you're focused on the cities, the sort of microcosms in that area where, as I know, and I'm sure Mayor Constant is the same, mayors get stuff done. So, this relationship between a large area and the focus on cities and what they're doing. Mayor, do you want to speak to the value of thinking in those terms?
Yeah, I find it incredibly valuable because the reality is the drop of the water in Bemidji ends up in my city infrastructure, not just the
Mm-hmm,
Mississippi, but into our water system. So
mm-hmm,
that was what drew me to MRCTI to begin with, because we have a lot of things that we deal with in prepping water that we withdraw from the river to be able to become consumable by our residents. So the whole idea
mm-hmm,
of agriculture and what's happening in the upper Mississippi relative to pesticides and things they're using grabbed my attention immediately. Things that are disposed of in the upper Miss that end up in the lower Miss absolutely interested me as the mayor of the city of Gretna,
mm-hmm,
and seeing challenges arise, be it drought, be it not enough water, too much water. We deal with a lot of flooding issues here. Um, and the drought in the upper
mm-hmm,
Miss is now showing its ugly face to us in the lower Miss relative
mm.
to saltwater intrusion. So it really spoke volumes to me that working together and solving and coming up with solutions at scale for the entire region was truly important to
Mm-hmm.
all of us as mayors.
And you just raised an interesting issue as we think about out here on the Colorado River. I think people tend to think about the origins of maybe your organization having to do with flooding. We all know about the 1927 flood, which created the federal flood control act. But the Mississippi goes up and down frequently. And so the droughts that you're experiencing is probably not the way people think about the Mississippi River. Talk about the impact of those droughts a little more specifically. I think you talked about saltwater intrusion. What else does a drought do? I'm sure it has a lot to do with commerce.
Drought is our worst threat, actually, on the Mississippi. It's typically more expensive. It usually lasts longer. Its impacts pervade many economies over a longer stretch of time. The ripple effects are more significant. And it's usually, when you have a drought, it sets you up for even worse disasters from flooding and storms after the drought is over. So you
Mm-hmm.
you get this twofer.
Hmm.
Not only horrible when you're going through it, but it's going to make the next event even worse. So that's why drought is so dangerous for us. And it drought usually doesn't come alone. It's usually followed with another very expensive, very insidious impact, and that is intense heat. So usually we're not just dry; we're usually hot and dry, and the myriad of impacts doesn't matter where you are on the river. Unfortunately, Mayor Constant is going to feel a drought in Minnesota. She's going to feel a drought in Illinois and Missouri.
Hmm.
She's going to feel a drought even close by as Arkansas is going to have an impact on her water levels. And she depends on the Mississippi River for drinking water, like
Mm-hmm.
49 other cities. So 50
Mm-hmm.
cities on the Mississippi River, including the city I'm standing in front of right now, the city of St. Louis, they depend on surface water from the Mississippi for their drinking supply, their manufacturing supply. It is the freshwater fuel of our economies, and drought just not only negatively impacts all those economies, it really has a drastic effect on our infrastructure, both above ground and below. That's very expensive, very long lasting.
So, Colin, you just linked the issues of drought and heat And the 10 Across Project just put out this week a whole report in concert with the Federation for American Scientists on heat-ready cities. So Belinda, talk about heat in Gretna and the New Orleans region, not only to what it's doing to the river, but your citizens, community health, the impact on workers' ability to maintain time on the job. Talk about heat in your city.
Oh God, we're going through an incredible heat wave right now. And it truly, it has been, well, let's just talk about the last 2 weeks. We've had a system right off the coast of Florida that keeps coming around into the Gulf. And this is the second weekend we'll circle with the same type of system. And it goes from torrential thunderstorms to extreme heat. We worry here in Southeast Louisiana about trying to maintain services. Even the people that are like our Parks and Parkways department, as an example, people are struggling to do the jobs they need to do, fighting too much rain one day and extreme heat resulting from the system. So it's something we are mindful of. It's something we have to let our employees take many breaks from. We do get behind on taking care of services and are dealing with just extreme emergencies in some ways. But it truly wreaks havoc on a service industry where people have to be outdoors providing a service to constituents. Not to mention, we worry about saltwater intrusion again and having to gear up for that possibility this time of year. That is something that is new to us this far up the river. It's something the southernmost end of the state has dealt with for many years. And although we see it on the news, we haven't been affected by it, but it's becoming more and more a possibility further upriver, which is extremely concerning.
And Colin, maybe you can give some context to what the mayor just related. She used the word new, that she hadn't seen something coming up this far north up the river. Given your experience and expertise in environmental studies and environmental law and sustainable development, is what we're seeing attributable to climate change? Some may disagree with that, but it sounds to me like the mayor is observing very directly changes in her city. Talk about what you observe on the Mississippi generally with regard to what are probably the impacts of climate change.
Sure. And I don't care what you want to call it. You can call it climate change, you could call it anthropological, or you could deny all that and call it something else. Doesn't really matter. These are impacts we're feeling right now. They're right in front of us. We have to do something about them. Mayor Constant has to respond. So it doesn't really matter what kind of rhetoric you want to use. It's the damage is being done. They are record events. They are persistent. What used to be a record event every generation spread out by 25 years or so is now every 2 years, or in the case of 2019, doesn't end at all. That was a 9-month drought, 270 days, flood, 270 days of flooding for the entire basin, Mississippi River Basin. It was the longest and largest flood in U.S. history. Right after that flood, we had 3 years of drought, punctuated by a 1,000-year rain event in 2022 in Missouri and Illinois. So all of these, from Hurricane Katrina in 2005 forward to today, we have sustained $250 billion in actual losses due to disasters. And that is just the counties directly adjacent to the Mississippi River. That's not the whole state. That's just next to the Mississippi. 250 billion in losses since 2005. So that is a significant drain, and we have to meet that. That cannot continue to happen. If that does, people would have no choice but to abandon these areas. But the economic value of this corridor is 5% of U.S. GDP just on transactions alone. $1 trillion in product moves right behind me in front of the arch underneath the Eads Bridge every year. That's $1 trillion in product. Yeah. That's just what's moving on the Mississippi. That's not That's not counting all of the ancillary economic benefits of the manufacturing and the agriculture and all the other economies that are adjacent to it.
So this is a great segue to what I wanted to talk about next, because you're putting this discussion in dollar terms, which brings up the issue of insurance, probably the insurance that Belinda is looking at in Gretna specifically, but you're also trying to develop an insurance facility or vehicle for the region that you're all participating in. So Mayor Constant, talk about how you think about managing some of the impacts that Colin just laid out, maybe especially in the face of potential reductions in the ability of FEMA to respond to that. How are you processing all of that?
It's a scary proposition, quite frankly. I mean, if there is not an opportunity for FEMA to respond to that, there is no way a city like the city of Gretna could ever prepare financially for such a catastrophic event, such as a saltwater intrusion event. Just last year, when we had to prepare for that event, the costs we incurred were almost $500,000 just in trying to prepare. So you consider preparation at the greatest level that we could afford, still does not prevent the effects of the saltwater intrusion catastrophe if that were to happen. And then how do we deal with it on a daily, living through the crisis and the expense of that, barging drinkable water from upriver, downriver to give us the drinking water necessary to sustain our constituency for whatever that length of time looks like, is unfathomable. That cost could be in the millions. And there is not a city around here that has the wherewithal to be able to pay for such a catastrophic event through a budget that would blow the budget for years.
Sure. So let's talk about how the organization that you're leading, Colin, is responding to that. And I think you're looking at parametric insurance with Munich Re on a region-wide basis, which hopefully would help out Gretna as well. But talk about the role of insurers and reinsurers in the way you're thinking about your organization.
Sure. So this is a little technical in nature because it's layered in multiple deliverables, and each deliverable kind of feeds off of itself. But I'll try to encapsulate it for you quickly. So a parametric insurance product is not unknown on Earth. There are several of them. They are successful. They do work. The Caribbean has one. The Great Barrier Reef has another one. I believe the Great Barrier Reef was the first one on the planet. The Caribbean followed, and then there's examples of some smaller ones around the world. This one would be the first one applied to a riverine region, and what it does is a parametric insurance model. You think of your insurance at home. I have homeowners insurance. I have car insurance. That's insurance that is tied to an asset, right? Parametric is tied to an event that, and I'm sorry about the background noise. Apologies.
No, we're getting the flavor of the river and the context where you are. No, it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's worth the view, right? Parametric insurance is tied to events for a region. So in that model, instead of insuring assets in cities, we're insuring against event thresholds. So many consecutive days of drought, so many days of temperatures above 95 degrees, so a certain level of flooding, a certain storm event that has a certain level of impact. If you trigger a threshold anywhere on the Mississippi River, you make a claim inside the parametric product. And the claim is designed to be money that the city can use for an immediate response, a 48 to 72 hour response to that event. That is the largest gap we have in U.S. disaster response regime. It's is the first 48 to 72 hours, nobody's coming. Nobody comes, nobody shows up. FEMA is weeks, if not months away. The state may be able to show up with a little bit, but nothing too big. This would be an immediate check to the city if they want it to put to work on a search and rescue critical recovery act right after the event. That is just actually a small part of it. Then what that parametric facility is tied to is a systemic reduction of risk across the whole corridor through the deployment of natural infrastructure assets. So we don't want to just have a parametric facility and leave it at that, call it a day. It has to be tied to projects that systemically reduce risk across the 10 states. And that is because that incentivizes everyone, the reinsurance industry, our cities, to continue to reduce risk so that the insurance itself can be portable in the long term.
Okay. So, Mayor, as if I understand it, you're developing and or have developed a 2030 plan for Gretna. So
Yes.
how are you taking into account what Colin just suggested about the events that you have to plan for that seem to be more frequent in some of these difficult events, flooding, drought, whatever they might be? How does that figure into your plan for the city? And what's that discussion like with your fellow council members or the public about what the city needs to do to be sustainable and vital into the future?
So we do a lot of green infrastructure work here in our city, and basically my philosophy and some of the things I talk about publicly is how we learn to live with water. And what does that look like for us, right? Because a lot of what we deal with here is too much water relative to what they experience right outside their door. They do not really feel the drought. We don't live the drought. We experience more of too much water, right? But educating the population here about, as Colin brought up earlier, we will experience the drought in other states. On the river is where we will experience those droughts. And for the people around here, they don't really pay much attention to the Mississippi River. And that's because the river here is the muddy Mississippi, the industrial, the treacherous river. We don't, and you've probably experienced that when you were here, unlike the Upper Miss with the jet skis and the party barges and the beautiful water in Bemidji, that's not what we see here. And so I have spent a lot of time through MRCTI educating our people how important that river is to sustaining us as a viable community. The fact that we drink from that river, the fact that what we don't want, we put back into the river through wastewater, and that we drink it again. And when I started talking about that 10 years ago, they were mortified. Like, some people did not even realize we drink from that river. So it's been a huge education. It's something that I'm very proud of, the fact that we're becoming more aware of as a community of how important that river is relative to what we put in it, because we're taken out of it, and how we need to be good stewards of the river. And so we talk a lot about that. And in the 2030 plan, it's more about sustainability through green infrastructure, because what affects them most is flooding. That's what affects them most. But then understanding that let's get away from political issues. As Colin said, call it what you want, but we are living the change of environmental issue. We're living environmental changes here. We're seeing it every day. Our rainfalls are no longer summer showers. They're treacherous storms that bubble up from nowhere, that could leave us totally incapacitated for several hours and can't get back into the street. So people are living that, and that has, I feel like, been the story since Katrina. Katrina was the needle that changed everything in emergency response for us, and I feel like for a good part of the country as well. And then it escalates with every year. I mean, we experienced a tornado 3 years ago. There's never been a tornado in Gretna, probably in generations, if at all.
Yeah. If I could again, I want to be respectful of your time. You mentioned Katrina. I did my graduate studies on what would happen in a storm the size of a Katrina hit New Orleans, and sure enough, everything that was predicted did occur. It's the 20th anniversary of Katrina,
Yes.
and Gretna was impacted by that as well. Obviously, New Orleans was more notable in maybe what we saw on our television sets. But as is it, I want to say helpful, but that may not be quite the right word. But you're right. Katrina set a bar for what we need to do and how aware we need to be of the changes in the atmosphere and the incredible challenge they can present. Is Katrina useful in that regard, and thus helping your community to say, gosh, this stuff is real, we've got to get after it?
Yes. And I think that really sparked the attention of our people. I mean, they had never seen anything like it before. And they experienced being
Mm-hmm.
away from home for 3 months plus or whatever.
Mm.
And so now when we talk about these environmental issues or extreme emergencies,
Mm-hmm.
be it flood, be it tornado, be it hurricane, they react because they know it's real. And I truly
Right.
believe that the mindset about environmental in this part of the country, in the city of Gretna, in the New Orleans metropolitan area, is very different. They know emergency management is real. They know that,
Right.
and Duke, since Katrina, and maybe it's just me, but since Katrina, look at the country as a whole. How many emergencies
Mm-hmm.
happen, be it whatever. I mean, the thing that happened with in Texas last 2 weeks ago, I
Yes.
mean, that's just heart
Yes.
wrenching. And it makes people realize you don't need to live on the coast to suffer
Right.
damages from water. You can live in the mountains now and have issues with water.
Well, which brings us to maybe the way we'll close this out. You have an upcoming meeting. And by the way, some of the, since you are talking about Katrina and hurricanes where you live, the reduction in some of the predictive tools that we have, we're going to be less equipped to think about hurricanes given what some of the cuts that are happening at NOAA. But let's talk about FEMA, because I think that's going to be central to your meeting coming up, if I understand you correctly, Colin, which is directly related to what the mayor is talking about. Talk about FEMA and its impact on your organization's ability to make your cities safe and vital.
Yeah. Um, FEMA's future is in doubt. It's going to have a different form than it has today. That's for certain. Whether you take the president at his word, wanting to drastically reduce the size and the scope of FEMA and push that more to state responsibility, or you look at what Congress is doing today. In Congress right now is looking to elevate FEMA. The current FEMA Reform Act, in its current draft, makes FEMA a cabinet level position and actually enlarges and improves and bolsters FEMA to be more effective and more efficient. Whatever route you take, disaster response and mitigation in the United States has to change from what it is today. It is wholly ineffective. It takes too long. It's very inefficient, and it's focused on the most expensive side of the balance sheet, which is recovery and response, not mitigation, adaptation, and resilience. We are absolutely committed to our keynote project, our flagship project, and that is deploying natural infrastructure along the Mississippi River. Our Mayor Gretna, is a leader in this because at one time she shepherded the largest pre-disaster mitigation project in Louisiana for her city, using a combination of natural and built infrastructure changes, innovations, and alterations. We are replicating that by deploying natural systems in key critical areas, 100,000 acres of new conservation land, critically positioned to absorb the most impact at the least amount of cost for the most vulnerable populations in 9 states across 45 cities. That is our flagship effort today, because we know However, FEMA is going to come out on the other side of this. We are hopeful that mitigation will pick up most of their capacity, but that's not a guarantee. These events are more expensive than ever before. There's more of them than ever before, and we have to reduce risk at scale. We cannot do it through the microcosm of just our cities. That offers a good primer, and those projects offer a good example, like the one that Mayor Constant had in the center of her city, which has been incredibly successful. It stopped flooding and storm impacts dead in its tracks for her. But we need to enlarge that across the vast landscape that is the corridor to help all of our cities and all 8 economies that depend on this river.
So if I was FEMA, and let's hope it becomes a cabinet level office, I would be heartened to know there was an organization talking about these things. You're sharing what you need to do collectively. You're thinking beyond boundaries. You're thinking about regions that are experiencing similar things. It's a model for what others ought to be doing, I think, and maybe an extension of the FEMA reorganization, whatever that turns out to be. It just seems like yours is a model that others should be observing. But anyway, thank you for your time today. This has been fantastic, and the clarity of purpose that the two of you have in your respective cities and/or states and organizations is really encouraging. Thank you for sharing all of this with us.